Hey Rifters, welcome to the show. Subscribe, rate, and review. Tell a friend. I'm very excited for this guest. Join us on the Patreon, www.patreon.com/RazorRiff61 uh, because we are RazorRiff61. I should change our name to RazorRiff61. I think that'd be funny. Anyways, I'm very excited for this guest. Um, You know her from Kindergarten Cop, Carlito's Way, and she has a new movie out about Ronald Reagan called Reagan. She plays Nancy Reagan. The great Penelope Ann Miller will be here. So, guys, enjoy. Like that button, like it, subscribe it, tell a friend, and enjoy. Raise a wrist. Penelope Ann Miller. Coming next.
From Hollywood, California, welcome to Razor Riffs with your host, Keith Reza.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you so much for doing this.
Of course, yeah.
Before we start, I just want you to know I really like your manager. He's a good guy. So like that's
Oh, he is. Oren is great. I'm
yeah.
very lucky to have someone like him in my corner and fighting for me and
Yeah.
trying to get me jobs and all that good stuff.
Well, I mean that's how it works, like you need people good on your team to help you succeed and get, on the mountain we call it, like climbing higher
Yeah.
on the mountain. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we got to have that support team because I can't go out there and sell myself.
Yeah.
I mean, I am in a way when I do these interviews, but to get the parts, it's good to have a good team behind you that believe in you, no matter, there's highs and lows, obviously, in this business. So I'm
Yeah.
great. I'm grateful that I've been working this long.
All right. Well, I might go like back and forth a little, but
Okay.
I wanted to start with common ground because you worked with my best friend for a while, and you were on this show called A Minute with Stan
Isn't it Stan
Hooper,
Hooper? Uh-huh.
and Norm MacDonald was one of my best friends. And
Wow.
yeah, so I just wanted to know, like, was he as crazy when you worked with him?
Well, he definitely is a unique character, that's for sure. Very funny, very smart, very talented. Definitely has his quirks. I know he and the producer had some issues on that show, but it was a great cast and it was a really funny show. And it's just unfortunate that it didn't continue because it could have been a really funny show. But I just think certain personalities and I don't know. But
Yeah.
Norm was great. He was, I mean, God rest his soul. I know he passed away recently and that's unfortunate. I believe he had one child, right?
Yeah, Dylan. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure that's got to be rough.
Yeah.
But he made his mark and he was yeah, what was your experience with him?
Well, I toured with him because I do stand-up comedy. So I toured
Oh,
with him for 9 years.
wow, amazing.
Yeah. So
Okay.
like, he had one son, Dylan, but he always called me his comedy son.
That's so
So,
funny.
I got a million Norm stories, but he was just so funny and he kind of liked pissing people off.
Yeah.
Like that was his thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I remember he was like, we did a 7 o'clock show and he did like 2.5 hours. And the manager came the following night. He's like, hey, you gotta keep it at an hour because we have a second show and we can't sell liquor past 12 or whatever if the second
Right.
show starts at 12:30. And then Norm's just like, but why?
I know sometimes he was like a kid. That's like a kid question. Why not?
Yeah, and then he'd do 2.5 hours again. So like it was just
My God. That's so crazy. Well,
yeah.
anyway.
But
Um,
But yeah, that's awesome. And like I watched the show and I thought you were very funny on it. And I was like, when I saw it, because his birthday was in October. So I guess I was just like watching and binge watching stuff. And I saw you and I was like, I should put in a request to interview you.
oh,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
yeah.
And then another great movie of mine is The Shadow. I loved The Shadow. And
Yeah, that
yeah,
was a lot of fun because I love period pieces and especially the 30s. I love the fashion and this, the 20s and 30s and even some of the 40s, but like that the architecture and the clothing, and it was so glamorous and elegant. It was just really at the height of Hollywood. So it was fun, that era. So it was fun to do a movie like that. And also it was kind of like the actresses that I always admired were like Myrna Loy and Jean Arthur and Carole Lombard and Katharine Hepburn. So it just reminded me of that kind of repartee with another actor, that kind of
yeah.
dialogue. So it was really fun for me. I really enjoyed it. So I'm glad you did too.
Yeah, and because a lot of people didn't know that it was actually a comic book. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know the shadows,
The,
right? Yeah.
yeah. So,
Um,
was that like your first adventure in the comic book, or like was that your first comic book thing you did?
um, Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I'm trying to think if there was any other ones that I've ever done, but yeah, that was. And I think, the hopes was that it would do really well and we would do a sequel and it'd be a running thing, but it's
You could still do a sequel. They're doing
yeah,
sequels like 30 years later now.
that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
I'm gonna write it and I'm gonna be like,
okay.
hey,
Yeah,
yeah,
there you go. All right. Well done.
And then another great film that I loved was the you did a Pee Wee Herman film and you worked
Yeah.
with Pee Wee, Paul Rubens, who is, one of the nicest guys as well.
He is truly was a gem of a person and so funny and but a real true friend, like a real sweetheart. He always stayed in touch. I always got the Christmas cards and the birthday memes. And he I was getting honored at the Sarasota Film Festival, and he's originally from Sarasota, so he was living there at least part of the time.
Yeah.
And he came to see me, called me up, and had read that I was going to be there in the paper. And then he even came to my tribute, and he was a real mensch like that. He was just a good person, and and I remember when there was the fire at the Paramount ranch where we filmed, he took a picture of our tree with it was Pee Wee Loves Winnie, or Pee Wee
Yeah.
Loves Winnie, or whatever, with the heart, and I'm stabbing it of course later because I'm jealous, but he took a picture of it and said this the tree survived. The rest of the ranch didn't, which was really sad, but it was really cool that he was so nostalgic as well. But he was a lovely person. I was at his memorial, another person that passed away too young. And it was so great to hear people share very similar types of stories about him. I think when he was your friend, he was loyal till the end and stayed in touch with people. And not everybody does that in this business.
Yeah. And do you think that's just like a Hollywood thing, or do you think like,
About not staying in touch.
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, if you think about it, I guess when there are people you maybe go to, I don't know, because I don't have
uh,
any other experience.
all right.
Uh, but
I'm sorry.
other than like high school, which I actually do have a lot of friends from high school, believe it or not, and junior high. Um, not a lot, but I have some really close friends that I've been friends with for a really long time, which is pretty cool. I think it just depends on the person. I do find though, so I don't know what it's like in another job, but I know like if let's say people go to college and they have a college experience, do they stay friends with their, college roommates or their sorority or fraternity brothers and sisters? It's like some do and some don't. I
Yeah.
think so it's all relative. In Hollywood, people move on to their next job. And if you were still in the same job with a person for a long time, I would imagine hopefully your friendships last. But
Right.
you move on from job to job to job unless you're in like some long running series like Grey's Anatomy or something like that.
Oh my gosh.
You're in it, some people change, but some of the cast. But for me, I'm always moving on to another job. So sometimes I'll get close at the time to the people that I work with, and then I'll stay in touch for a little bit. But then sometimes we just our lives just are following different, we're in different locations, we're living in different places, but there's some people that I've circled back with that
Yeah.
I still stay in touch with, or if I run into people, it's always really um, fun and pleasant, but it's not like I remained close with everybody I've worked with, but
Well,
yeah.
no, I mean, because I've only done like two movies and I'm not very proud of the movies because I'm not an actor. But
Okay.
I don't stay in touch with anyone I did the movie with, but I do
Right.
stand up and I stay in touch with everyone I
Good.
work with
Well,
on
because you're
stand up.
probably on a circuit together,
Let's
right?
do it. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
I could see that. I could see that there's sort of a comic world out there that you guys run into each other all the time, and that's cool. And obviously if I'm going to some Hollywood event, which I don't do very often, it's just not my thing. I
right.
could do it more often, and perhaps if I did, I'd probably run into a lot of the same people. I know. But I just don't tend to play the Hollywood scene that much. It's not that it is playing, but I'm not interested in like, oh, I got to dress up and I got to go and I got to schmooze and la la la. So, it's this time of year when I'm invited to all these academy, I'm a member of the academy and I get invited to all these like
Oh,
taste
you are? That's awesome.
tastemaker screenings of all these movies that they want to have nominated and actors and actresses and so on. So I get invited to tons, a SAG Screen Actors Guild as well has them. And so you're just like constantly being invited. And I'm like, I can't go out every night. Like that's just, oh my gosh, it's so draining.
Right.
As much as I want to see the movie and it'd be fun to run into some people, I don't know, like Coleman Domingo's a friend and I did a movie with him years ago and we've stayed in touch and I want to see his movie Sing Sing. I was invited to like an event and then my daughter got the flu and I was like, okay, well, I try.
Right,
So
right. Exactly.
yeah, I do my
Oh,
best, but yeah, it's nice when I run into people that I know that I've worked with, like Al Pacino. I ran into not that long ago at an event like that. It's a private screening room, and they have a little party afterwards, and
yeah.
it's nice. Yeah,
Since you brought up Al Pacino, that's one of my favorite movies. And
Carly.
yeah, and I thought that because that was a totally different tone of your past work. So I thought it was
Yeah,
pretty cool. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. No, it's one of my favorite experiences and roles that I've had in my career. It was kind of a pivotal time in my career, I think, for a lot of reasons. And, just because it was such a meaty role, playing the girlfriend or the ingenue, whatever, can be not that interesting, really. But then when you get a role that has a lot of dramatic impact and is really in a part of the story, it's, because it's a love story too, really.
Yeah.
Um, I think that was, I just felt working with Al Pacino, Brian De Palma, Sean Penn. I mean, it was just, there were Viggo Mortensen had a small part in it. There were so many great people. Um, that it was just to do such a big movie like that in New York, and it was just really an exciting time. I'd say that and The Freshman with Marlon Brando, and then when I did Our Town on Broadway, that was a big. I was pretty young. It was like late 80s, but
Yeah.
I was nominated for a Tony, and it was such a, and the play won that year for Best Revival, and that was such an incredible role for me as an actor and being able to see what I could do. But like you said, as far as a dramatic piece, I've been doing, I think, a lot lighter movies. You're right, like Adventures in Babysitting, even The Freshman was a comedy.
Yeah.
Um,
The
I think
Shadow.
I done Kindergarten Cop, right?
I
So
loved Kindergarten Cop.
yeah, so I think doing Carlito's Way was a shift for me. And now I seem to do more dramas too, and I like doing comedy.
Uh,
So I wish I did more comedy actually.
when I was a kid, I actually auditioned for Kindergarten Cop.
You did?
Yeah,
God, how old were you? Because I'm like old, so.
I was 4.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're a baby.
yeah, and I didn't even come close.
Oh, I'm
But
sorry.
they I remember that they asked me if I had a twin, and I didn't know
Oh, right.
why.
You played my son,
Yeah,
who were twins. Yeah.
yeah, and I didn't know why. And then I was just thinking maybe that's just like a thing that with kid actors they prefer twins because they could
They
work
can switch off.
half.
Yeah, just because of all the legalities or the rules, I guess the union rules about how long a child actor can work, and then they have to go to school or something like that. They can't work late hours. So if they're identical twins,
Uh,
obviously, then they can work them longer hours because there's two of them. Yeah.
yeah, so I was gonna say if I was a talented actor, you could have been my mom,
I
and
could have.
we
Or
could have
and if you'd had a twin.
exactly, and we could be
Yeah,
running from Richard Tyson.
that's right. That's right.
But
And
yeah,
Arnold Schwarzenegger would have been your teacher.
oh
So
that's true. But I think I would have just rather run from Richard Tyson. That just seems fun.
and climb the water tower. Yeah.
Yeah,
Run away. Yeah.
and then see Kathy Moriarty every now and then, be
Yeah,
like,
that's
hey.
right. Oh my gosh. So funny.
Uh, I wanted to ask you, because you've played a couple roles where they're actually real people, like Nancy
Yeah.
Reagan, which was fantastic,
Thank you.
and then you also played the other president's wife,
Mary Todd Lin-
Mary.
Mary
Yeah.
Todd Lincoln. Yeah.
So I wanted to know, like, how do you dive into research like that? Because I mean, Nancy Reagan's probably a little easier because
There's
you
more
probably, yeah,
information about her. Plus, you can watch videos and interviews, and she wrote a book. She wrote a memoir called "It's My Turn," and I carried that around like my Bible at the time because I couldn't get enough. I'm hearing everything from her perspective of everything that's in the movie, and I'm like, wait, what did she say? How did she feel? Blah 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 blah. So it really helped me. And even with the writer, I talked to the writer, and I'd be like, and I said, no, but Nancy said it like this. This is what she said when he was
yeah.
assassinated. Da, 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 um, and they would just incorporate that in the movie, which was great. That they were Sean McNamara, director, and Howie Klausner, the writer. They were so collaborative with me because they knew I was doing all this research, and we really wanted to make the character as authentic as possible. And that role needed a little bit of development anyway, from the original script. So. It was hard. I mean, that was probably one of the hardest roles I've ever taken on, just because she's so iconic and so memorable. And I mean, most people, there's obviously a much younger generation that don't know who she is, but
Yeah.
obviously, like between a certain age range, they either have seen her because of historically speaking, or they grew up around during the 80s, like I did. And, they just remember the Reagans. They were so like they were also an iconic couple. I mean, they were just sort of the epitome of a power couple. But they were really in love. I mean, they really had a love partnership, which was really cool to find out about, actually. He wrote her a love note like every day. And she published a book of all of his love notes called I Love You, Ronnie. Um,
Oh,
but just
nice.
seeing that tender side of him, I mean, people know him as the president or a politician, for SAG union, president, actor, SAG
Yeah.
president, governor, then president. So he went through a lot of day. He was also a radio talk show guy.
The
He was a
th
lifeguard,
the
you
thing
know.
that I found fascinating about him is because I have Asperger's syndrome, so like
Uh,
presidents is like my thing. Like I know everything about presidents.
oh, cool.
But like I know that Reagan's first wife, like she kind of liked being the star and all that
Yeah,
stuff,
Jane
and
Wyman. Hmm.
Reagan wanted to go into politics, and he didn't really want that
Well,
spotlight.
the thing is, when they got together, obviously they were both actors and both, in that lane, and that's what they were doing. And then when he became,
The
I think
governor, yeah,
no, even when he was SAG, because he was governor with Nancy, it was just the SAG union, getting into the SAG union and becoming more involved that way. Like his career started like waning, but his kind of political career started coming up, and he seemed to get more interested and passionate in the cause of the union, and trying to make it better, and dealing with the communist party, all this stuff. There was so much I didn't even know, like the union workers and the mob and all these people involved during that time, and he was trying to clean it up. And so she just, I think Jane Wyman, his former wife, like I think she was so unnerved by it. Like, why are you getting into this? I married an actor. Like, she
yeah,
didn't want to marry a politician, and he was becoming more and more, and not unintentionally, but he just became more and more interested politically, which is why he then ran for governor. But I think she wanted to be the big superstar, and she was won an Academy Award shortly after they got married. And I think her career was like on, it's sort of like a Star is Born. Her career was on the rise, and his was like kind of not doing as well. And I think she didn't like that at all. I think it really bothered her. And I think that was definitely the demise of their relationship. So he was very gun shy about relationships and getting married and falling in love and any of those things. He was dating around, let me tell you. And
Yeah.
then really in the movie, but it was in, the books I've read. And and it took a while for Nancy to, I don't know if it was persuade or convince him or whatever, but I think it took him a while to be able to trust again and to believe that somebody would be there for me, like love you unconditionally and love who you are. And it was really Nancy who kind of, I think, really realized that he had a calling and a purpose that wasn't acting. She didn't even care about being an actress. She certainly gave it up, no problem. And then he was working for GE. He was also in Vegas doing these, kind of vaudeville, embarrassing things, just to make money. He was doing these GE, and I think it was the General Electric when he was going all around the country and interviewing people is when he started getting really involved in politics and caring about helping the country and so on. And I think she really saw his purpose and she believed in him. And so she was the one who really gave him the confidence and
Yeah.
the courage. She lifted him. And I think the more he realized that she's there for me and she wants this for me and she's going to be my partner, the kind of, the woman, with every great man, there's a woman, kind of like she was kind of more the silent partner, but she was really his partner. And I think he said, I would have lost my soul if Nancy hadn't come into my life. So that whole story to me was so fascinating and cool and interesting about the Reagans. And I think it's something you do see in the movie, their love story. And I think that's really neat too. It's not just it's not a political drama, really. It's a biopic, but,
Right.
not that there aren't politics involved, but I think it's, a story about this man's life and how he came from, you know, humble beginnings, and his dad was an alcoholic, and then his mother had all this faith, and then so on, and it just built and built and built because I don't think he saw himself as being president.
Yeah.
Oh, but anyways, going back to the role, I just had to do so much research because I really wanted to capture her essence. I wasn't going to look exactly like her, talk exactly like her. I wanted to do this, get as close as possible. And I have to give kudos to the hair and makeup and wardrobe team, which, in my opinion, should win
They
an
were
Academy
fantastic.
Award.
Yeah, they're
I think they should be
fantastic.
nominated. I think they should win. Hollywood hasn't necessarily embraced our movie as much as we would like to. The audiences have. And I know a lot of people in Hollywood who have watched the movie and have been very supportive and everything. But, as far as really pushing for award season and all that, but I do think they deserve it. I think Dennis Quaid looked amazing. I think Gorbachev looked amazing. I think they did a great job with me and making me look as close to Nancy as I possibly could. And that was a big part of it as well. But just learning about them and her, and so yeah, it was daunting. But it was challenging, but it was exciting, being an actor, it's fun to challenge yourself. So,
Yeah.
Mary Todd was an interesting character too. Very, very, um, I would say she was kind of villainized, and so was Nancy a lot, especially in the White House years. They loved Reagan and didn't like Nancy so much. And the same with Mary Todd Lincoln. Um, Although, of course, there were people who didn't like Ronald Reagan or uh,
Lincoln. Yeah.
yeah. But aside from that, the first wives, or the first ladies, I should say, um, were not looked upon in the best way, and there were similar things going on between the two of them. So it was interesting to see the parallels between Mary Todd and Nancy. They both loved fashion. They both got criticized for that. During the Civil War, obviously there was a depression and her getting fancy clothes, but she sort of felt like, I'm kind of what in England would be royalty, so I want to dress appropriately
You got
and
dressed the part. Yeah.
dress the part. And Nancy, I think, had a love for it anyway, but wanted to dress the part. Um, And then they redecorated the White House, and they both got backlash from that because when Mary Todd moved into it, she said it was in shambles, and she was the one who started the first like open house, like open touring and around Christmas time and bringing people into the White House. So she wanted it to look like it's the people's home. They're only there for a period of time, right?
Right.
And but essentially that should be, the people's home because they voted them in to live there for a period of time. So I think she wanted to be proud of it. And same with Nancy when she got to the White House. She said, tattered curtains and the rugs were a mess and the electricity and this, that, and the other. But she used privately funded money. She didn't even use taxpayer money. So there were all sorts of things, but that they wanted to find wrong with them. But she struggled with that. Nancy did, and so did Mary Todd. And Mary Todd lost like three of her four boys in horrific
Oh yeah, yeah.
illnesses. So she went through melancholy and depression, and then she got into seances and talking to mediums, and Nancy got into astrology. So there's a lot of parallels between those two people, even though, hundreds of years apart, or 100, I don't know how many years, 100 something. Anyway, it's been a long time.
Well,
A
it's pretty
time.
close to
Few
a
hundred.
hundred.
Yeah, few, yeah. So,
Not a few
but
hundred, but
yeah, but yeah, I'm just trying to think of the math here, which I'm not good at. But the one of the first ladies who didn't get vilified like that and was kind of looked upon, and put on a pedestal was Jacqueline Kennedy, and she loved fashion, redecorated the White House, but they adored her.
yeah.
So interesting. Anyway,
You know what else is interesting though is because first of all to backtrack on your Reagan story, I'm not a big fan like, I know people like get divorced and stuff for whatever reason. But in
mhm.
a way, you have to be thankful he got a divorce because that whole story and then that part came to you. So you're like,
Right, right.
yeah.
It all worked out for me, right? At the end of the day, it's all about me, right? So if
Exactly.
Nancy hadn't been his second wife, I wouldn't have gotten the part.
That's
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
Makes perfect sense. I love it. Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
thank you. Thank you, Ronnie, for divorcing Jim, picking Nancy, and then somebody picking me.
yeah, it all comes around.
That's right. It all comes around to Penelope. Yeah.
And then to go back to Mary Lincoln is like, because the when people wrote in journals and diaries, like I don't really know how to read cursive that well, especially
Oh,
cursive back then.
yeah.
So like it's very fascinating because you read it and you think, what are they talking about or what are they saying?
Well,
It's
their
like
language is like speaking another language too, then. They spoke very
yeah.
differently. But I read some really cool books about her and them, and there were definitely books written in letters that they had maybe found still. But that was cool, and then going back to the real pic people that I have played, then I'm playing, Dahmer's mom and
Oh yeah, yeah.
and Mary Kay Letourneau and Joyce Mitchell, who went to jail. So I've played some jailbirds. Um, Joyce Mitchell was the woman who had helped the two convicts escape from jail, who was the seamstress at the prison. And then she has this sort of affair with both of them. Like they all both pretend they're in love with her to get her to help them out. And she was married with four kids.
Manipulation works.
Mary Kay Letourneau, had an affair with her very young, I guess elementary school, middle school, was 13. He was 13 when they met. Oh my gosh. Anyway, that was
Yeah.
crazy. And then they got married, had kids together, but she went to jail, got out, had another kid with him, went back in, had another kid. Crazy story.
Uh,
But yeah, I played some other real life people. And then Dahmer's mom was obviously another interesting character. And not a lot to find about her in terms of she did a few interviews, which I watched, of course, but not a lot of books written. I mean, Lionel the dad wrote a book and didn't make her sound so great, but you know,
right.
there's two sides to every story, right?
Oh yeah, it's kind of like that saying there, it takes two to tango.
Exactly,
Right.
But they both blamed each other for their son Jeffrey being, I mean.
Yeah.
I don't even know. In case calling him a serial killer is just too kind. He was crazy. He was a monster. I mean, is where it's called monster, but he was really a monster. But the thing is that he was so cut off emotionally. There was something just really cut off about him, um, which
Yeah.
I think happens a lot with people like that. They
Yeah.
just don't have
Definitely.
they don't have a compassion gene or something.
Yeah. And
Because
see that,
how could they do these horrific acts in life?
and that's the thing that's scary about like being on the spectrum, because a lot of people think I don't have emotion genes or whatever, but
Oh,
I really do. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like I don't want to look up roadkill or whatever. I don't want to do that.
Right. Well, it's interesting because the dad, Lionel, got Jeffrey Dahmer into roadkill thinking that would help bond them because they weren't getting into sports and whatnot. But my character, Joyce, or the mom, was really upset that he was getting him into roadkill because later she's like, well, you're cutting up animals.
Right.
Obviously, they were already dead. But this whole thing, and they say a lot of serial killers like that start with roadkill. Did you know
Oh,
that?
I
There's a
didn't.
statistic about it.
Oh, I did not know.
Yeah,
I mean,
with animals.
yeah. Here's how like out of the loop I am about like serial killers and stuff. I watch a lot of forensic files just
Oh.
because I think Peter Thomas has like the best broadcasting voice ever. But there's an episode where this lady she got her head cut off, and then like no one could tell who she was, but she had breast implants. And I found out that breast implants have numbers on them, so that's how they found out who she was. Like,
Wow.
yeah, and I was like that.
In that case, well, obviously she died, but
No, no,
at
yeah,
least
but
for them to find out, getting the breast implants help them find out.
who she
Gosh,
was,
yeah,
yeah. So
that's wild.
that
Oh,
it. Uh,
anyway.
I wanted to respect your time, but can I ask three more quick
Sure.
questions?
Yeah, because I have a thing I have to go to, but absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. I wanted to ask you, what is your biggest fear when you first started in this business, and do you still have that fear?
Um, I mean, I guess the biggest fear is um I don't know if the big, well, it comes hand in hand. It's like rejection and then not getting parts. And then what if I don't get other parts? Like, am I going to keep working? So it's sort of like, it's my last job and maybe the movie didn't do so well or a TV show or whatever. Are they going to want to hire me again? And so, or just really caring about a role and not getting it. But I kind of have to look at it as everything is meant to be and happens for a reason. And if it's not mine to have, then it's just not mine to have. And so I have to kind of let it go, but I just have to have a lot of faith. But that took a long time. Well, actually, in my 20s, I kind of felt like, I don't know, I wasn't really thinking about it. It
Yeah.
was more when I got older, because obviously the roles and the opportunities don't come as often, unless you're just like a massive, huge star and it's just nonstop, offers, that sort of thing. But even still, it's hard to sustain that. And only a few people do.
Yeah.
But as I got older and started having children, there was a fear of not working and not getting the jobs I wanted and being viable and people being interested in me or seeing that I'm good at, obviously like, critics are going to say what they say and that can hurt you if they don't like what you've done or whatever. But now I just pay no attention. I just am like, oh my gosh. If they
Oh
say
yeah.
nice things, I don't mind. Like I'm not going to take it I'm not going to like that's one person's opinion, kind of thing.
Well,
Um
the way I look at critics is like you can't really take, it's just their opinion
their
because
opinion.
they're
Yeah.
not you and they don't know how to do you. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I mean, like for instance, Reagan, it's almost like they all got the memo of all the critics were just going to bash the film.
Right.
You don't even know if they even saw it or saw it all the way through, or they already came in with like, a critical, a negative opinion. However, the disparity between Rotten Tomatoes was like, what was like 18 or 20% critics approval, and there was 98% audience approval. That should tell you a lot. That should tell you the
Exactly.
people that actually are going to see the movie are really loving the film. So why would we pay attention to what the 18% versus the 98% think? So to me, that was just such a glaring and obvious that they just came in not wanting to like it. They weren't going to like it. It didn't matter if it was good or not. They just wanted to bash on it. And I'm just grateful that people went out to see it, and still you can see it now. Now it's on home television. You can watch it on Apple TV or
On demand.
on demand, Blu-ray, Amazon Prime. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can find Reagan now, so you can see it anywhere you want.
Yeah.
But just the fact that we got out in the theaters, and it was took 4 years. I mean, we shot
Yeah,
during
you were
COVID
dealing with COVID and then
and the strikes, and oh
yeah.
my gosh, it took forever. And then everyone's like, "Oh, well, they wanted to release it during an election year." And that was not the plan. It just turned out that way. But we wanted it to come out a lot sooner. Uh,
Right.
anyway, but it
Uh,
came out when it did, and it did well. So.
Yeah. All right, my second to last question is because you've worked with everybody, who is somebody that you haven't worked with that you'd like to work with?
Oh, wow, there's probably a few. Um, well, and this is so obvious. Like Meryl Streep would be cool. Brad Pitt would be fun to look at. Um, I would like, I don't know, I'd love to do like a Martin Scorsese movie.
Uh,
Um,
with Brad Pitt.
with Brad Pitt and Meryl Streep. Why not? I don't think he's worked with her, so let's do it.
Let's
Let's do
do it.
it. I
I'll
don't know.
start tweeting them.
Yeah, there's so many great uh I'm just trying to think. Like you put me on the spot. I wish I'd had my list. There's so many great people that I admire so much. Anyway,
All
that's
right.
just off the top of my head.
Those are great answers. I like
All
it.
right.
And
Yeah.
then my last question for you is, Penelope, if you could go into a time machine and talk to a younger version of yourself, it could
Hmm.
be from yesterday or when you were a kid
Yeah.
or whatever, what
Yeah.
advice would you tell yourself what you know now?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I would just say appreciate what you have when you have it. Don't worry so much about everything. And I think, there was a time that I worried a lot and was anxious and stressed out. Not that I don't get stressed now about stuff, but I just think, we got to love what we do, just enjoy the ride. And I was on a great ride. I mean, I still am, but I was really on a great ride there for a while, from my, I'd say mid to late 20s to, well, actually even my early 20s, because I got Biloxi Blues, the Broadway play with Matthew, and that was sort of the beginning, Matthew Broderick. That was
Yeah.
the beginning. Then I did the movie with him, then I did the freshman with him, and but just things sort of catapulted from there, escalated, and you know, yeah, I wish I just appreciated it more then than I do looking back on it. Not that I wasn't happy and I wasn't grateful and blessed, but when it doesn't come as easily, you're like, dang, I was really lucky and, appreciate it. But also mainly, honestly, is just have fun when you're working because the other stuff you have no control over. How
Right.
the movie turns out, how people will receive it, whether it does well. If you're enjoying the job and you're enjoying the people you're working with and you're enjoying the role, that's the most important part. That really is. Like you got to enjoy the process and don't worry about the outcome. I mean, obviously, we care if the outcome is good. And I do care a lot about that because I want whatever I do to be quality and good. But, you know, a lot of things like we don't have a lot of control over. The one thing we do is to be able to enjoy it while we're in it and enjoy the work.
Yeah.
And those are those actors that I admire, like Pacino and De Niro and Brando. They didn't care about the stardom. They didn't care about the fame. They cared about the work. And those are the things that I've taken away from them more than anything else, as amazing as they are. Um, they that to me just said so much about them is that they just were so passionate about the work that they were in at that moment and the character they were taking on and the role and the story and they were just so involved and I love that.
The exact
Yeah.
opposite from Norm. Well,
God bless him. I know, right? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what he was thinking half the time. It was hard to figure him out. But
uh, well,
yeah.
Penelope, it was an honor talking to you. I want to respect your time. I know you got a lot of stuff to do, but it was an honor to cross paths with you. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
well, thank you. It's lovely to meet you and enjoy your ride, whatever
Yeah,
there takes you and your comedy and all your writing and whatever else. But I appreciate you wanting me and I appreciate you being a fan of my work. It means a great deal because without people like you, I don't have a career.
yeah.
So,
Well,
we do it for you, you
we'll
know.
work together in Kindergarten Cop 9.
Yeah, that's
Like,
right. Kindergarten. Yeah,
yeah,
because we did it too, but with like Dolph Lundgren. So we need another
yeah,
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But what were we going to do with the shadow? We got to work on the
Well, the
shadow.
Shadow 2, exactly.
Yeah.
Shadow
Yeah.
2, then
Yeah.
Kindergarten. All right,
Yeah.
we'll green light them.
We got it. We'll work on it. Okay. All right. Well,
Bye.
you take care. Lovely meeting you.
Have a great day,
All right.
Penelope.
All right. You too. Bye.
Bye. All right, guys, that was the episode with Penelope Ann Miller. Subscribe, rate, review, and we'll see you guys next week on Razor Riffs.